Ted Geisel did not want to become Dr. Seuss. In fact, he believed that writing children's books was a step down from his career as a political cartoonist and as a writer. But that's not what happened, and it was not an easy road. Theodor Seuss Geisel was born in 1904 in Springfield, Massachusetts, to a German Lutheran family. He grew up on Fairfield Street. That's significant because many people assume that he grew up on Mulberry Street, based on the first children's book that he published, entitled, and to think that I saw it all on Mulberry Street. So this features a child named Marco who has a very vivid imagination, as did Ted Geisel. The book was published in 1937. Traveling home from school one day, young Marco sees a plain horse and wagon. He allows his imagination to run wild. From a mere horse and wagon, he envisions a more fantastical scene. He turns the horse into a zebra, then a reindeer, and finally an elephant accompanied by 2 giraffes. The wagon turns into a chariot, then a sled, then a cart carrying a brass band. Then a whole parade of people are added, and the police get involved. But this story also introduces the fact that even though he is known as a beloved children's author, some of Ted Geisel's work was problematic. The imagined parade of animals and people led to that particular book being removed from publication by the Seuss estate in 2021. It said that there were images and text that were hurtful and wrong. One example was the way Chinese people were depicted in the parade and the text that said they ate with sticks. I did a little research on this, and there was, as you know, a whole bunch of comments about the removal of this book. I think the funniest one was from a Chinese Canadian who said, yes, most Chinese people eat with sticks. So it's interesting when this happens. I think we're all aware of this going on in a variety of ways today. However, just a second, I lost my place. So anyway, the book was removed 82 years later. They also removed 5 other books for the same thing, for caricatures of people that they thought were probably not very good and could be hurtful. By the way, a first edition of And It Happened on Mulberry Street, 1937, is available on eBay for $1,200. He also did some very powerful anti-fascist cartoons in the early 40s, beginning of World War II, and they have also now been viewed as problematic. Although the images he created were common stereotypes of Germans and Japanese at the time, many people judge them today to be racist. He, in an interview, said he did not intend to hurt anybody or to cause that kind of trouble, but that he was reflecting the way people, a lot of other cartoonists, were drawing as well. Not excusing anything, but just wanted to bring you up to speed a little bit on his path was not a straightforward one to becoming the famous Dr. Seuss. A collection of these cartoons is entitled Dr. Seuss Goes to War, is right over here, thanks to Peg. I spent a lot of time going through them. They are fascinating. It was also interesting to me to find that some of the characters that show up later in the children's book also show up in the political cartoons. He uses a stack of turtles as an issue. Again, stacking up turtles with a dictator on top is a problem and is probably not going to lead to victory for the dictator. There's also an example of creatures with flags on their bellies, and that plays into a story I'll tell you about in a few minutes. He went to Dartmouth, but was voted the least likely to succeed by his classmates. However, now the Dartmouth School of Medicine bears the name the Dartmouth Geisel School of Medicine. He married Helen Palmer in 1937. She was an author in her own right, and many believe a major force in the development of his career. Remember, he was reluctant to go the direction of children's stories. After a 40-year marriage, she passed away, and he married Audrey Diamond, who continued to be a major part in his estate after he died in 1991. Although he had no children of his own, his creations have made reading fun for millions of children, and his books are among the best-selling children's books of all time. 2 of his books are in the top 10 children's books, which means they sold over 6 million copies. The Cat in the Hat. Anybody want to guess the second one? Green Eggs and Ham. Thank you. In case you're wondering what the top-selling children's book of all time is, it is not a Dr. Seuss book. It's a little golden book called The Pokey Little Puppy. Sold over 4 million copies and still selling. Although there's much more to share about Ted Geisel and his long career, we're going to look today more at how he raised awareness about the absurdity of war, discrimination, conformity, and environmental degradation, all through children's stories with silly rhymes and outlandish characters. The Sneetches in 1961 revolves around 2 groups of creatures: the Sneetches with stars on their bellies and the Sneetches without. Sneetches with stars were better than those without, mostly because they said so quite loudly. But the plain-bellied Sneetches met a man named McBean, who had a star machine. They paid him to put stars on their bellies. But when the original star-bellied Sneetches saw that the other Sneetches had stars, they declared stars were no longer in style. And McBean then fixed the machine to remove stars. Stars are in, stars are out, over and over again. In the end, all of the Sneetches spent all of their money either having the stars put on or taken off, and depending on what was trending, let's put it that way. One day, McBean rode off with all their money, saying the Sneetches would never learn. But, I quote, "But McBean was quite wrong. I'm happy to say that the Sneetches got really quite smart on that day. The day they decided that Sneetches are Sneetches, the day all the Sneetches forgot about stars." Throughout the story, Dr. Seuss emphasizes it is essential to accept and appreciate people for who they are, and that judging them on something that's an outward appearance is quite silly. Perhaps the best example of resisting conformity was shared with you by Jeannie with Hooray for Diffendover Day. This is a book I used to read to my students and graduate students as well, who were classroom teachers at the end of our semesters together, and I didn't find a single teacher that didn't like the book. They all liked teachers who thought outside the box. Another book that challenges our idea of conformity is The Cat in the Hat, published in 1957. Now it's a classic, obviously, about a tall cat with a red and white striped hat who visits children on a rainy day who are very bored. And the cat brings chaos and fun with his companions, thing 1 and thing 2. Throughout the day, they ignore the objections of the terrified fish. As I read this book again, I thought that terrified fish is their superego, and they just ignore it. The book uses simple words and rhymes to engage beginning readers, and it explores themes about how to create your own fun, but also taking responsibility for that fun. The children and the cat do a remarkable cleanup at the end of the day of the story, just before Mom comes home. One of Ted's editors gave insight into the story. She said that Ted lived inside his head, getting bored easily and looking for other things to do. In 1986, for example, he was already a very well-known figure, but his nature had remained unchanged. Quote, "At a charity gala at the high-end Neiman Marcus department store in San Diego, Ted disappeared for hours. When his wife Audrey finally found him, he was sitting in the women's shoe department, happily switching the prices around." And this is just 5 years before he died. So he was the age of some of us here. Jeannie touched on another book in the opening words, his book, Oh, the Places You'll Go, which in a sense is his last book, although he did have other illustrators and writers finishing it off for him. In the book, it refers to soaring to high heights and seeing great sights, to be left in a lurch on a prickly perch. Dr. Seuss addresses life's ups and downs in this book with his trademark humor and whimsical illustrations. The inspiring and timeless message encourages readers to find success that lies within, no matter who they are, what challenges they face, or here's the nonconformist part, what others expect them to do. It is now a perennial favorite and, as we said, a perfect graduation gift or for anyone facing a new phase of life. I'm going to read the last part. It may be what Jeannie read, but we'll say it again, just in case they missed it. You'll get mixed up, of course, as you already know. You'll get mixed up with many strange birds as you go. So be sure when you step with care and great tact, and remember that life's a great balancing act. Just never forget to be dexterous and deft, and never mix up your right foot with your left. I just can't imagine what fun it must have been to come up with some of these rhymes as he's working on these books. A powerful book, I think, is the Butter Battle book, written in 1984. I'm going to begin by reading the opening passage. On the last day of summer, 10 hours before fall, my grandfather took me out to the wall. For a while he stood silent, then finally he said, with a very sad shake of his very old head, as you know, on this side of the wall, we are Yooks. On that side of the wall live the Zooks. So what makes the Yooks and Zooks different from each other? Yooks eat their bread with the butter side up. Zooks, as you may guess, eat their bread with the butter side down. Back to the book. So you can't trust a Zook who spreads butter underneath. Every Zook must be watched. He has kinks in his soul. That's why, as a youth, I made watching my goal. Watching Zooks with the Zook watching Border Patrol. Ted Geisel had no idea what would be happening with Border Patrol and walls as the context for today, as the context for his story was about the Berlin Wall and the Cold War. The Zooks and Yooks engaged in an ever-escalating battle, from threatening looks and words to slingshots to catapults to cannons to guns to bombs, or as Dr. Seuss put it, prickly snick berry switch to a triple sling jigger to a kickapoo kid leaded with poo-a-doo powder to 8-nozzled elephant-toted boom blitz and to the big boy boomerang. I'm sure the moniker Big Boy is not lost on you, as the name given to the bomb that was developed and dropped on 2 cities in Japan at the end of World War II. On the last page, the child and the grandpa witness a Zook and a Yook, both on the wall, each carrying a great grenade-like version of the big boy boomeroo. The boy says, "Grandpa, be careful. Oh, gee, who's going to drop it? Will he or will he? Be patient," said Grandpa. "We'll see. We will see." A book many of you also know is his way of bringing children aware of how some folks and many of us in ways we don't even think about have contributed to the degradation of our environment. That book, of course, is The Lorax, which was published in 1971, and the story essentially is about what happens when you cut down all the trees, and it isn't good. Long before saving the Earth was a global concern and climate change came to the forefront, Dr. Seuss, speaking through the character of the Lorax, warned against mindless progress and the danger it posed to the Earth's natural beauty. In the first paragraph, he describes a very gloomy scene where nothing is green, there are no trees, and no bird sings, and I immediately thought, oh, that sounds like Rachel Carson, and she wrote it 10 years before Dr. Seuss. Beginning of Silent Spring. But the beginning of the Lorax is at the far end of town where the grickle grass grows and the wind smells slow and sour when it blows, and no birds ever sing excepting old crows, is the street of the lifted Lorax. The Lorax, we learn, was an old, brown, mossy creature with a mustache who pops out of a stump of a truffula tree. He announces that he speaks for the trees since they have no tongues. The truffula trees have tufts like silk and smell like buttermilk. A boy wanders onto the landscape and finds another character, the Onceler, who lives atop a store and tells the story of what happened to the Lorax. The Onceler, an entrepreneur, saw a way to make money from the tufts of the trees. He could cut down one and make a thneed. He described a thneed. A thneed's a fine something that all people need. It's a shirt, it's a sock, it's a glove, it's a hat. You can use it for carpets, for pillows, for sheets. Well, the thneed, it's hard to say that. The thneed sold for $3.98, but the demand grew. You can never tell what people are going to buy. More trees were cut down to make more thneeds. When the last tree was cut down and the landscape is devoid of all things green and all the creatures, the Lorax lifted himself away by the seat of his pants. The Onceler becomes filled with regret. At the end of the story, the Onceler miraculously finds one truffula seed. He tells the boy, end quote, plant a new truffle, treat it with care, give it clean water, and feed it fresh air. Grow a forest, protect it from axes that hack. Then the Lorax and all of his friends may come back. The story of the Lorax was challenged and banned in some schools, notably in California, which was a bit of a surprise. In 1989, the logging community felt it negatively portrayed the forest industry and might turn children against it. There were also complaints that it was anti-business and environmental propaganda. Critics argued it was too critical of capitalism and industrial growth. But others saw it as a valuable tool for teaching environmental responsibility, sparking debates over censorship and educational balance all over. Dr. Seuss reminds us that it is up to us to save the environment. The last category I want to address, we've talked about a little bit, and that's his work that makes us aware of all kinds of injustice. An earlier book, Horton Hears a Who, in 1954, is really a fun book. It's about an elephant, a very endearing elephant, and he becomes a very popular figure over the years for people. In the colorful jungle of Newell, Horton, this is the elephant, discovers something that at first seems impossible. A tiny speck of dust contains an entire miniature world, Whoville, complete with houses, grocery stores, and even a mayor. But when no one around will stand up for the Whos of Whoville, Horton uses his elephant-sized heart to save the day. This is a tale of compassion and determination and proves that any person, big or small, can choose to speak out for what is right. The most famous line in the story is, a person's a person, no matter how small. But the story that perhaps is most significant for us today is the one I shared with the children, Yertle the Turtle. And I made a mistake that Yertle the Turtle actually came out in 1950 and Horton Hears a Who is 1954. The children and I shared this story earlier, but this story was shared in our service, thanks to Peg looking this up, by Reverend Duffy in the fall of 2016, immediately after the presidential election. So the turtle named Mac brings down the Turtle King with a burp. At the time, Yertle the Turtle, the King, was representing Hitler in Dr. Seuss's view, who was also atop a very shaky pyramid. The image of the shaky pyramid, as I said, appeared in one of his political cartoons in the 1940s. We've all been astounded at what has happened in our world in the last year. Sadly, the Turtle's King's words rang all too true. I rule from the clouds, over land, over sea. There's nothing, no nothing, that's higher than me. He's angered, as we said earlier, about the moon being higher up, and he demands that more turtles stack up so he can reach to the heavens. But then Mac, the turtle on the bottom, burps. I'm going to read the last paragraph to you because it's really powerful. It's a little hard to read, to tell you the truth, because unfortunately there's a lot of truth in it. And today the great Yertle, that marvelous he, is king of the mud. That is all he can see. And the turtles, of course, all the turtles are free, as turtles and maybe all creatures should be. May it be so.